Dr. Sonya here, and today I'm going to be talking about our menstrual flow. So some women experience really heavy flow, especially on days 1 and 2, and there can be various different reasons as to why this discomfort is showing up. So one of the things that we always want to look at, of course, is our toxicity profile. So are there things in our environment, the things that we're using every day, the things that we're eating, or even the thoughts that we're having, looking at our toxicity load to make sure that our body has the capacity to process this stuff out of our liver and our gut so that the body doesn't have to hold on to all of this ama. So in Ayurvedic medicine, they talk about toxins as ama, this overload of toxicity. And so the first thing you of course want to do is look at your environment to see if there's any things that are hormone disrupting. So that comes with cosmetics, the cleaners that we're using, foods that we're eating if they're not organic, if we're eating meat, if they're good sourced and not pumped with antibiotics or hormones. So looking at all those aspects that we can control is really important. That's probably one of the number one reasons why women experience estrogen dominance, which then can lead to these heavy periods. So the liver has a huge role in dictating what we're going to detox out of our body. So the liver, of course, is going to need extra support when it comes to detoxifying this overload of hormonal disruptors that we get from our environment. The other thing to think about is looking at your diet in general. So from an Ayurvedic perspective, they say that women, especially in the last 2 weeks of your cycle, it's better to go vegetarian. Reason being that meat can be very heavy and can be very ama promoting, so toxin promoting. Again, depending on what source you're getting, how much you're eating, and also your constitution. So depending on how well your body is actually digesting this meat is really important to look at. Do you have enough hydrochloric acid in your stomach to actually digest these proteins and break them down and have the capacity to absorb the good stuff from this? So looking at this is so important when you're looking at overall health for your menstrual cycle. So from an Ayurvedic perspective, they say if you eat more vegetarian, it's actually going to reduce the amount of flow your body has to secrete, because our menstrual cycle is a form of detoxification every month. So that's something to consider. The other thing to consider is caffeine. So we were talking about our liver. So our liver's job is to look at the toxicity, to go through phase 1, phase 2, and then phase 3 of detoxification so that we can move these excess estrogens out of our body. And one way that it does that is by, going through that phase 1 and making it either water soluble or fat soluble so it can move through our bowels or through our urine. And then it's going to methylate it to make it less toxic. And it's also going to use our enzymes from our estrobolome, which is the microbiome in our gut that's very specific to our hormones, to break these things down. So glucuronidase is the one that's going to be used. So what caffeine does, it actually blocks that process. So looking at your caffeine intake, again, especially in those last 2 weeks of your cycle, is going to be important. The other thing is that women just aren't eating enough carbohydrates sometimes in those last 2 weeks. So if you're eating a keto diet, making sure that you're creating variation so that you're not just eating high fat, high protein in those last 2 weeks. That's really when you want to bring in the carbohydrates, because those carbs, the healthy carbs, are going to feed aerobic bacteria. So bacteria that like oxygen, and we want to create more oxygen in our body. And from an Ayurvedic perspective, when we eat healthy carbohydrates, we enhance that ability in the body. So those are just a few things that you want to kind of pay attention to, what you're doing those last 2 weeks. The other thing, of course, is like movement, how much we're moving, what we're thinking, whether we're meditating. So there's lots of different things that you can do to help your body and mind slow down in those last 2 weeks so you can get ready for that time of bleeding. And then there's tricks that you can use on a daily basis to help support that. So again, from Ayurvedic perspective, rose is amazing at reducing heat. So another reason why women have heavy menstrual cycles from a Chinese medicine perspective and Ayurvedic is there's too much heat in the body. So the body's trying to cool itself down at that time. So something that you can do is take rose petals and mix it with some honey and some sugar, and you actually, for the first 2 weeks of your cycle, you let it sit there and ferment. And then the last 2 weeks of your cycle, you would take a teaspoon of that and put it in some almond milk before bed, or if you do dairy, some grass-fed organic milk, Even though dairy is one of those ones from an Ayurvedic perspective, they say that you shouldn't have too much of, because that too will contribute to that heavier flow. So that's something you can drink before bed. The other thing you can do is hibiscus tea, and this is something you can drink throughout your cycle and even during your bleed to help support that cooling nature that your body needs, especially now that we're moving into spring, summertime, when our external heat is going to increase. We want to start reducing some of that internal heat, especially if we're having heavy cycles. And then there's loads of supplements and other things that you can do, of course, to help support your menstrual cycle. But these are just some tidbits that I wanted to give you today